Hey everybody, long time no see. So I haven't focused on VR all that much on this channel, but I'd definitely say that it's my favorite medium of gaming right now. There's just so many cool immersive games out there, and they're just gonna get better and better as VR gets more popular. I've been using VR for just about a year now, and I've slowly been building a list of problems and potential solutions for those problems that I think will be beneficial to anyone who's recently gotten a VR headset, and maybe even helpful for some more experienced VR users. These tips and tricks are partially my own and partially taken from the other VR users on Reddit and on YouTube, just kind of various places. Tip number 1. When you're first getting into VR, you're probably going to experience motion sickness at some point. It's really normal, and the severity of the motion sickness can alternate based on what game you're playing. Typically, any game that has the ground moving beneath your feet will probably cause this. Games that use smooth motion, or games like Pistol Whip, where you're just kind of automatically being pushed forward. You don't really have any control over that. The floor is moving beneath you. It can be kind of disorienting whenever you first start playing. Even I can experience this sometimes. Like if I take a break from VR for too long, and then I immediately try to play Boneworks, or I try rocket jumping in like Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and hand grenades. It's just, you don't want to like shock yourself too much. If you're a new user, I'd recommend Beat Saber, Job Simulator, maybe Until You Fall, kinda. You move really slowly in that game, and there's various games have vignetting and stuff like that to kind of help, reduce motion sickness, but I personally find that to be really annoying, so I don't ever use those. Just kind of ease your way into VR if you think you're getting motion sick. Tip number 2. Make sure that you actually have a decently sized play space before you start trying to do VR. VR can work just as fine as a seated experience or a completely stationary experience, but it can definitely ruin some of the more subtle immersion if you're constantly worried about punching your TV or kicking a table on accident. Personally, I have about a 6 foot by 6 foot play space, and I find that's pretty much more than I need, honestly. I can move around comfortably with full body tracking. I can play movement heavy games like Pistol Whip without worrying about slamming my head into something or slamming my arm into the wall. It's just nice to not have to worry about that. For a comfortable experience without physically moving around like too much, you don't want to be jumping around the room, I'd recommend a play space of about your height by your height at least. That should be plenty of room. You're not going to worry about hitting anything if you have your arms fully stretched out, because that's how arm span works. So I'd stick around there. Again, it's not totally necessary to have that much room, but it gives a nice buffer between you and your environment so that you can focus on just playing the game you're playing and not worry about punching something. Tip number 3. If you have a headset with IPD adjustment, make sure you set it correctly. IPD stands for interpupillary distance, and it's measured in millimeters, which is basically just the distance between the center of your pupil to the center of your other pupil, basically. It's going to vary for each person, but you can download apps that'll kind of automatically measure it for you, or you can just measure it yourself in a mirror. But having this set incorrectly can have a slight effect on your depth perception in VR and can kind of make it slightly more blurry. It's not a huge deal if you have this wrong, but I want the best experience that I can get because I've paid for the best experience I can get, and why would you not want that? Some headsets can be adjusted, like the Quest 2 and the Index, while some cannot, kind of like the Rift S. The Quest 2 has 3 settings: 58mm, 63mm, and 68mm. And you basically just want to measure your IPD and just set it to the closest value. 1 corresponds to 58, 2 corresponds to 63, and 3 corresponds to 68. But if you have an Index, for example, you have kind of a full slider instead of just 3 settings. And while you're adjusting it, you can actually see in VR what your measurement is, so you can get it perfect if you want to. But there is kind of an issue with it occasionally bumping, and sometimes it'll slide out of place, so you might have to adjust that every now and then. Tip number 4. Be extremely careful not to touch your lens any more than you need to. These are one of the most important and most fragile parts of your VR experience. As of right now, all VR headsets use plastic lens. They're great for keeping the weight down, but they're not great for longevity. If pretty much anything other than your eyelashes or your microfiber cloth touch your lens, it's probably gonna scratch them. Unfortunately, there really aren't any good screen protectors out there for any VR headset lens, so it's kind of just up to you to make sure you keep them nice and intact and scratch free. I'd highly recommend buying a VR lens cover for when your VR headset isn't in use, especially if you have a Quest 2 and you carry it around a lot. Be extremely mindful of your lenses because they're really fragile. Tip number 5. Related to touching your lens, try not to keep your lens too close to your eyes. A lot of headsets have various functions to get the lenses physically closer or physically further away from your eyes. And the reason you want to do this sometimes is if they're closer, you're going to get more field of view. And if they're further away, you're going to lose that field of view. Some people adjust them too close, and I consider that to be when your eyelashes are like physically touching the lenses. You should not be doing that. They're going to get really dirty and they're going to fog up much more quickly the closer they are to your eyes. So for the Quest 2, I would recommend using your glasses spacer if you're using just the default face cover, or you could buy someone from Amazon, like buy a VR cover one and just get a thicker cushion just to keep that away from your eyes. If you get it really close to your eyes, I don't think it gives you that much of a field of view gain, and I don't think it's worth having to clean your lens every single time you use your headset just because you're like, oh, I can see slightly more in my periphery. I don't think it's worth it. Plus, it's also probably not that good for your eyes. Like, you already have basically 2 TV screens plastered to your face. You probably shouldn't try to get those screens as close as physically possible to your eyes just for your own sake, much less, the VR headsets. Tip number 6. Cover reflective surfaces in your play space. Regardless of the style of tracking your headset uses, reflections are gonna cause some issues with your tracking. Oculus's inside-out tracking, the way the cameras work, it does a pretty decent job of not picking up reflections too bad, but there's only a certain amount that it can do. If you have like a mirror directly in front of you, it's not gonna work very well. But this can also affect base stations, because base stations basically shoot out infrared light. That infrared light can get reflected off of other surfaces, and you don't want that. It's gonna cause incorrect positioning, and it's not gonna be able to figure out your distance from the base stations or the velocity very well. But admittedly, most games don't really need extremely precise tracking, but if you're a Beat Saber fanatic like myself, you're gonna want as much precision as you can get so you can not get extremely triggered whenever something misses, but it absolutely hit, but whatever. Like, for instance, in my play space, I have a TV like directly in front of me, about 6 feet away. It's pretty much right at the height of my HMD, so I always cover the TV with just a blanket when I'm playing, just in case it just starts to lose tracking, because there's a very high probability that it will. Tip number 7. Get accessories for your headset. There are so many different types of accessories for headsets that can just increase comfort, quality, and just the way it looks, that there's just going to be something for pretty much anything you need. Does your headset get really hot? There's an accessory for that. Is the face gasket that came with your headset really gross or just really uncomfortable? Just get a new one. Do you want to look like Zero from Borderlands 2 and you have a valve index? Well, look at that. There's an accessory for that. Some accessories are purely aesthetic, while some can be total game changers and, in my opinion, are downright necessary. Tip number 8. If you have a wired setup, you should really use a pulley system for your cable. I love my pulley system. Keeps the headset cord away from my feet, it's out of the way, and it's fun to try explaining to someone who doesn't even know what VR is. Now, it's been shown that it can cause some extra wear and tear in specific points on your cable, like where the actual pulley's attached to the cable, but I feel like the wear and tear from specific points in the cable aren't comparable to constantly stepping and tripping over the cable like I used to. It feels almost the same as wireless when it's set up correctly, which is a definite immersion booster. To ensure your cable's longevity when you're using a pulley system, you need to untwist your cable every VR session. If you don't, it's just going to continue building and building and building, and every time you twist it, it's twisting one way, and eventually you're gonna get some micro tears in the cable, and that can lead to just, you've got stars in your display. It can just completely cut out. You don't really want that. Steam sells replacement cables now for the tether cables for the Index, but they're pretty expensive, so I would avoid having to buy another one if I could, but that's just me. Tip number 9. Find some way to counterbalance the weight of your headset. Basically, every headset is going to be pretty front heavy. The worst example of this is being the Quest 2 with the factory strap, where literally all of the weight of your headset is floating directly in front of your eyes. There's basically nothing counterbalancing the weight behind your head, and it's pretty much the main reason that everyone suggests getting an Elite strap or some different strap, just because usually the straps will have a decent amount of plastic on the back for padding, and that adds a little bit of weight to the back of your headset, but usually not enough, in my opinion. The cool thing about this tip is that you don't necessarily even have to buy anything. Like, you can totally just jerry-rig something onto the back of your headset that's got a decent amount of weight and basically make a counterweight yourself. It's probably not going to look amazing, but if you don't really care about aesthetics that much, you just care about comfort, this is an easy one that you can find some simple solution to. If you don't want to do that, some companies sell weights specifically for balancing the headset on your head. An example of this is Studio Form. They sell these little things that strap on the back of your headset. They're just straight up weights, but they're really good at distributing the weight a little bit more evenly on your head. I use them with my Index and I like it. I don't know if I appreciate the overall increased weight of the headset, but I do like that it's a bit more balanced and I don't have to keep my headset quite as tight to keep it where I want it. Tip number 10. This may sound a bit contradictory to some of the other tips that I've had so far, but don't go overboard on buying accessories. You can absolutely have a great time in VR without spending an extra $1,000 on accessories. Every headset is meant to be played just with what you get in the package and nothing else. I'd say you probably should play for at least a couple months to identify what little things could be fixed and what little things irritate you about VR, and then buying accessories specifically for those fixes when you notice them. I'm sure 90% of people don't even need anything more than what the headset comes with, but they're just nice little additions to make your experience just a little bit better. Tip number 11. If you have access to a 3D printer, print some cool accessories. This is something that I'm surprised isn't talked about more. There's this huge world of cool and useful VR accessories that you can easily 3D print for free, other than the cost of the filament and stuff, obviously. I've printed quite a few cool things for my index that I really enjoy, ranging from cable management to aesthetics to protection. I'll include a link in the description for some of the quality of life prints that I've made for the index, or not made, that I made for the index, that I really enjoy. Alright guys, that's the end of this list. I hope you found it helpful in some way. This video in particular was geared more towards beginner VR users, seeing as Christmas is coming up, and I'm sure many of you will have gotten an Oculus Quest before watching this video. So let me know in the comments if these tips helped you. This video was originally going to be a lot longer, but I've decided to split it into 2 parts so it's not like 25 or 30 minutes long. Personally, I hate videos that are ridiculously long. But the next part will feature more specific tips aimed at experienced VR users. So thanks a lot for watching. Subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay safe out there.